classes a lot. And in mainstream D&D, there are 11 or 12 classes. The 12th one was recently added in 5e, which is Warlock, which we'll talk about briefly. So the 12 classes. So first of all, you have Fighter. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, classes are basically how you interact with the world. A lot to do with combat because D&D is more combat-oriented because people love spectacle.
Yes.
So to start off, the Fighter is basically a strong boy.
Yeah, it's a fighter. You have melee. You have weapons that you fight with.
Congratulations, you're a fighter.
Some of the archetypes do have a little bit of magic, but we're not going to go into the archetypes today. We did that once already, so you can go back and watch the third episode for the different archetypes of each class because they get split up even more. But fighters, basically just your main melee, like the first pick for melee class that you have. It's been around since the beginning of D&D. It's one of the 3 or 4 classes that have been around since the beginning. Then you have Rogue, and this is your thief class. That is more dexterity based and like can steal things, has focus on stealth, has focus on like trap finding and opening locks, all of that sort of stuff that is necessary when going into a dungeon in most regards. Obviously, you can have a party. By the way, you're playing with multiple people for D&D. You can have a party of multiple people. And all of them can be rogues. All of them can be anything you want. There's not really... Your DM should be able to match the storyline and match the combat and everything, and tactics and everything, so that any party of any number of classes should work. In my opinion, anyway. For instance, some players are really uptight about having a healer at all times, but when my players don't have a healer, I just give them more healing potions or something like that to ease that a little bit for them. I don't force them to find someone to be a healer, because that makes people play things that they don't want to play, and that's against the point of the game. But anyway, moving on. We then have our Wizard, which is the first basic spellcasting class. Arcane spellcasting class, which just casts spells a lot. It's a wizard. There's not a lot out of a description to go along with that.
Through books.
Yeah, wizard. So there's 3 different spellcasting classes. Wizards are intelligence based, and they learn their spellcasting through reading books and acquiring knowledge over time that they research, and they scribe spells down. They have the most spells of any of the classes. Basically because they technically have a never-ending supply so long as they have the money for it. But yeah.
Or they go to Wizarding College.
Yeah. You mean Hogwarts?
No.
Then you have your Cleric, which was what I was talking about before, your usual healer. Brad refuted me on this when we talked about classes last time. But healer is a good word because they all can heal. That doesn't mean they all do heal, but they all can heal. That is their basic purpose. They are divine casters who are big into the different gods of the world. All clerics follow some sort of god, or they should.
They follow something.
Depends.
Yes. They follow some faith that they tout about, and that's part of their character. Then you have the Druid, which is the other kind of faith class in a way, because the Druids worship mostly the old faith, which is the faith of just nature. Druids are a nature-based class. They can turn into animals. In some editions, they have an animal companion, and they have a lot of spell casting. They're a very utility-based class. In my opinion, my favorite class of the 12, because in every edition they're OP, but in a good way. They're great. Brad, it looks like you're about to argue with me there.
I'm just having a face.
Let's talk about 5e that allows them to wild shape into elementals forever at 20th level with no limit. Yeah, it's OP. But yeah, then we have our Paladin, which is a divine casting class, which is similar to
It's basically a cleric.
It's like a cleric and a fighter combined.
Yeah.
And like you'll notice is if you know any sort of history that all of these classes are named after real life things that have existed in medieval times. Except for one that I am always really annoyed about. But we'll get to it.
Yeah, I'm like trying to think.
But yeah, paladins are crusaders essentially who like go out and try to rid the world of evil. Usually, though in 5e that changed a little bit where you can be in alignment with all of the classes, so you can be an evil paladin technically and go crusading for something else.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Because then it means you don't lose. Because I remember 3.5, it used to be you would lose your powers.
Paladins were terrible until 5e.
Good.
Well, I shouldn't say that. I like being a lawful good paladin. It's just the punishments for them were too severe until 5e. Maybe 4e. I don't remember if 4e changed paladins.
I think it was still in 4e too.
But anyway, then you have your ranger, and your ranger is essentially your huntsman type of class that can either go like a more bow route or a more two-handed weapon route in earlier editions. That changes a little bit in 5e because there are a ton of different archetypes. Yeah. Do all of them get that choice?
Well, I mean, they can choose any fighting style. So.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But yeah, a ranger is also very their backstory is often tied to vengeance because a lot of them focus on hunting down specific enemies, and so they get bonuses against like giants or orcs or something like that. They're kind of druid-like and kind of fighter-like in that they have some nature powers from being woodsmen, and they're mostly focused on combat though. Yeah, and then you have the most OP class, at least in 5e. In earlier editions, it wasn't as much so, but the Bard, which is a singing class that also gets to cast spells, and that also can pretty much, it's your jack of all trades that can pretty much fill any part of the party that's needed. If you don't have a healer, you can have a Bard do that. If you don't have a fighter, you can have a Bard do that as long as they do take the right archetypes. There's two options for that. If you don't have a support, you got Bard. If you don't have a caster, you got Bard. You pretty much got Bard for anything and everything that you need that you don't have. Even Rogue, really. You can make a Bard do Rogue stuff if you need to. Though that one, I will argue, is a little more niche.
But it can.
Yes, you definitely can.
Bards do everything.
Then you have the Barbarian. The Barbarian is just kind of a juiced up fighter. From a aesthetic standpoint, they're barbarians. They're more like wild people, essentially. And they have... Yeah, they're all melee combat sort of fighters. But focused more on an ability that they all have, which is raging, which allows them to go into even greater furies of fighting, for the slight disadvantage of when they get out of that fury, they are more exhausted than the typical fighter. But that rarely happens. So, yeah.
And then next up, we have a not realistic class.
Yes, the one that annoys me very much is monk, because a monk in D&D is a martial artist fighter, which is not what a monk is in real life.
What? Religious studies major?
It's not. That's not what a monk is.
Kung fu fighting?
No.
All the time?
No.
Oh.
I mean, the monk of D&D is more based off of something called the Sohai. I can't remember where it's from, but which are technically the equivalent of monks for Buddhists, but they're not called monks. So I don't know why D&D decided to do that, except to, I guess, make it easier for people to pronounce. It just, and also, it's not just that about monks. Monks are just my least favorite class in most editions, just because they
So much fun, though.
almost always are either too OP or too underpowered. They've never been gotten right, in my opinion, in any edition. But they're your martial artist fighter class. I still like them, just not as much as any of the other classes. Most things in D&D, I usually am put into the category of having to say, I don't like it as much as any of the other things, but I still like it because it's D&D. And I like all the stuff. But yeah, monk is your other alternative fighter class for if you want to go in barefisted or with like a nunchaku or quarterstaff, which sometimes doesn't fit some of the worlds that people build, which is another problem with monks I have sometimes. Though you can easily make a part of your world that has it. But then we have the other two arcane spellcasting classes, which are Sorcerer and Warlock. A Sorcerer is a spellcasting class that gets its power from bloodlines.
Basically, was born with it.
Yeah, they were born from a regular person and some sort of superpowered being having a child, like a dragon or a genie or something like that. Or
just randomly came up in genetics or yada yada or something or other.
And then
many,
a warlock.
Many years ago, somebody in their family practiced magic.
Yes.
To be that simple.
Many years ago, someone had sex with a dragon, and there they are. I mean, that's not wrong.
It's not. It's also very similar to what warlocks are described as.
Warlocks are arcane spellcasters that kind of are like clerics in that they get their powers from another being. They get it from a demon or a great old one from Cthulhu mythos or an angel or something like that. Something that's not quite a god but very powerful and gives them their unique abilities.
It's like a contract for power.
Yes. Alright, so our fourth one, we talked about races. We're only going to give an incredibly brief description of each of the races.
5 words?
5 words or less. Arakokra.
Birds.
Bird people. Eagle people.
Asamar.
Angel people.
Bugbear.
Though not necessarily good.
Like gorilla things.
Bugbears.
Gorillas.
Like big gorilla, big
gorillas.
or goblinoid beings that thrive on fear.
That's more than 5 words.
That's fine. Changeling.
Changelings. Change.
They
Human
change.
life.
They can
Shapeshifters,
shapeshifters. Yes.
Dragonborn.
Best class. Or best race.
Worst race.
Dragon people.
They're dragon people
With
that have no lore.
They have the best lore. You get to make it.
Terrible lore. Dwarves. Everyone knows what dwarves are. They're great. They're sturdy firehouse or fire hydrants that have a lot of stoutness.
Elves.
And
sorry.
Elves and half elves.
Pretentious elitists.
Pretentious elitists with knife ears.
Not great at everything. Against popular belief.
They claim to be.
They are, though. They're not. And that's why they're terrible.
No, I've played them both. They're not.
Otherwise, they're
terrible.
No, I love elves, but they're overrated. Tieflings.
Elf is elf and a human, basically best of both worlds.
Tieflings. Demon people. Or devil people.
There's a difference.
There is a difference. Furbolg. Forest giant people
friendly.
Who are very friendly and just hermits, sort of. Genasi. Genasi are born from the different 4 types of genies: air, wind, earth, fire.
Yes.
Gnome. Inventor, small people.
Trickster.
Tinkerers.
Trickery based, yeah. Goblins.
Adorable.
Small, misunderstood little boys who are great.
Who are always fought at level 1.
Yeah, and they're supposedly evil, but they're just
they are,
misunderstood little boys.
They are, though.
Goliaths, giant people that live in the mountains.
Bigger than giants.
Fight Club.
Yes.
Halflings, really lucky small people.
Lord of the
I
Rings,
love halflings.
Right?
Yeah, hobbits as well. Halflings are hobbits.
It's just a nicer way of putting it.
Warlike goblin people.
Tactician war people.
Yeah. Very hierarchy based war people.
Human. Boring people.
Yeah, boring. Kalashtar, Dream People. I don't think we talked about that.
No, we didn't.
Last time, did we?
They're too human-like that we didn't talk about them, I think.
Yeah. They're based in dreams. But Kenku,
adorable.
Best little bird, little crow people.
They're cursed. So they
that were cursed, so they can't speak, but they can mimic everything. And they can't fly either. And they're the best.
Yeah.
Kobolds.
These are all the different races that you can play, by the way. So yes, you can play a race that mimics everything and can't talk, and that adds to the roleplay value. And those who
it makes it
disagree with me
really
can
good
fight
for
me.
roleplay value.
Those who disagree that it adds to roleplay can fight me. Kobold.
Better dragon people.
Yeah, better little dragon people.
Okay.
Very true.
Okay, I take offense to that.
No, it's
Kobolds are
absolutely
not
true.
better than
Yes,
Dragonborn.
they have so much more lore and
All right.
so much more interesting depth to them.
Kobolds on the surface are like a lot weaker, but their coordination together.
They're they're intelligent.
together.
They have
They
a
believe
bunch
in
of cunning
teamwork.
trickery and traps. They have so much more interesting lore to them than Dragonborn.
Basically, the DMs are just faving over the things that we make into NPCs.
Yeah, kobolds are great.
Yeah.
Lizard folk. Lizard folk are lizard people who are
hunters.
I love them.
Yeah.
Loxodons. You'll love them too
elephant
eventually.
people.
Loxodons.
Probably.
That's a little spoiler for
Loxodons.
Brendan.
Elephant
Elephant people.
people.
I love them already.
Orcs. Kind of your standard goblinoid raider type of thing, but also very religious, like God-fearing type of race.
They're great.
Shifter.
It's
like
a lesser werewolf kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
werewolf race, sort of.
All,
But
like,
also
Catholic
were-crow,
stuff.
were
anything.
tiger.
we're a lot.
You know.
Were squirrel.
Tabaxi, cat people.
I love them.
But not quite cat people, really.
They're really cat people.
They don't... yeah, they look a little bit more, like, between cat and mongoose, though.
That is
if you
true.
look at their features, actually. Turtle...
Oh,
turtle
turtle people.
They're great.
They're awesome. They're
Triton,
great.
water people. Vedalken, those are like meditative people. It's hard to explain them. They're kind of like an alien race, sort of. Viashino are like cave lizard people, who have a lot of unkempt emotions. And then Warforged, which are robot people. That's a 5 or less word description. Most of those weren't, but yeah. To learn more about them, go and listen to our 4th episode of 1st season. Then our 5th episode, we did character construction, so you can go back and learn how to create your own characters for D&D. Then in 6X1, we talked about the additions. We're not going to talk about the additions in depth. We're just going to go through the different. We're just going to go through what our rankings were for them. So there's 5 editions of D&D, and there's also Pathfinder, which are all very different. And I'm going to give a brief explanation of why these are ranked the ways they are for me. So my least favorite is 4th edition because it's very much kind of a video gamey sort of edition for me. That was more tactics, well, sort of tactics based, but also. There were just a lot of funky things that were different from all of the other editions of D&D that were confusing for people who had played D&D up until that point. For a new person coming into D&D, 4E was a good edition. For a person who'd played D&D for a long time, 4E was the worst edition. I still like aspects of 4th edition, just like I like aspects of the Monk, but it is my least favorite edition. Then next up is 1st edition, where it all began. It gets credit for being the beginning, but it has very bare minimum to it at the time it was created, with only basically just focused on exploring dungeons for like a few games and then going to another dungeon with the same party, and you could have multiple characters that one person played, and it was less of a roleplay experience and more just like describing where you went a lot of times. And the only reason was was because they didn't give players a lot of stuff to go on at the time.
And also D&D was first based off of like war tactic games.
Right.
That were basically thrown into a magical realm.
They had systems for combat, and they had systems for dungeon, and they had systems for everything else, but that system for everything else was basically saying, DMs, do whatever you want! There, you have no basis to use.
Yep.
And then my third least favorite, or fifth overall, is Pathfinder, which is a modification of 3.5. So it's very complex, but it also makes the characters a little too overpowered in comparison to creatures. It also is basically a battle simulator. That being said, this is my review of Pathfinder. It's basically just a battle simulator. It's a good battle simulator. It's a very well-designed battle simulator, but it's basically just a battle simulator. A lot of the stuff designed in it is not very optimized for actual role-playing, in my opinion. Most of the stuff that is role-playing things was only tangentially so, where it was first designed for combat purposes. Then my next one, 5e, is my third favorite of the actual editions, and 5e is the simplified version of 3.5 that is used today. It is a very simple D&D style for most people, not quite as simple as 4e in some ways, but yeah, was a good medium between 4e's simplicity and 3.5's complexity. I think it's too simple in some ways, which is why we'll get to my other ones. My second favorite is 2nd edition, which was the one that was pre, like sort of the modern editions. It wasn't called 2nd edition at the time. My reasons for that are mostly because it introduced a lot of the things that made D&D today. First edition kind of started it, but 2nd edition is where things really expanded. And also, I have a lot of nostalgia from it because I played that with my dad. And then 3.5 is my favorite. It's the most complex. It has the most materials on it. That's mostly why I like it the most, is because it has the most resources to use for the creation of it. There are some things that I don't like about it. The classes in 3.5 are not good. They're one of the worst classes of any edition. But for the most part, 3.5 is my favorite edition. Bradley.
Basically, my order, 5e is my favorite, or second favorite. It's up there. I love 5e. It's simplistic. It works with my brain.
Right.
The rest I'm just not as much accustomed to. Yeah, that's basically it. And I feel like asking Brandon. Brandon, what's your favorite edition?
I feel like it's a bad reasoning, but my favorite edition is 3.5. It's the one I started with, so there's the nostalgia factor, but it's the one I've played the most, because most of my friends, when I got into it, played 3.5. But on the tangent of Drew, the classes are pretty rough, having not played 5e, but I definitely think it's the most customizable out of all of the editions.
Yeah, 3.5 is definitely the most customizable. Yeah. And I will say that of all of these editions, there's one edition that is actually better than all of these editions, and that is just Homebrew, which is the D&D game that you design from the pieces that you take from other editions. Now, that being said, you can easily make a horrible abomination by piecing stuff together that way. But if you do it right, Homebrew can be the best D&D game for your group, because it's exactly what you designed to want it for. Mm-hmm. And then our last time we talked about the dragons. We won't go into them today, because there's just so much in-depth stuff we talked about with the dragons when we talked about it last season. But they are beautiful creatures. They are one of the best things in Dungeons & Dragons. We were going to talk about Dungeons too, but we just didn't have time. And we really, honestly, didn't have a lot to talk about. At least right now, we haven't had the time to formulate something for it.
But after this next season, or like school semester, we'll have a lot more information to fill those dungeons with. So maybe we can recap at the end
Right.
No. Anyways.
So, we should talk about our plan for this semester then.
Yes.
What we're talking about this season, not what we talked about before. All that's in the past now.
But
We gotta
keep it
talk
in your
about
brain.
what's new.
This is like math. We build up on what we already taught you.
Well, next week, we're going to talk about the most controversial topic of Dungeons & Dragons, of course. We're going to talk about alignment.
What? Alignment? Like, are we making sure things are level? Or...
Yes, exactly. We're making sure everything's fair and level and nobody's upset. That's not possible. So alignment is basically what your character's morality scale in the world. It goes from chaotic to lawful and evil to good, at least in most editions. We'll be talking about the different alignments of Dungeons and Dragons next week. The following week, we're going to talk about feats, both in 3.5 and in 5e. Just the which are different things that you can add onto your character that go outside of classes that help to make your character an individual compared to other characters. And we'll talk about how 3.5 is so much better than 5e when it comes to that.
We're gonna have a fight.
I agree with Drew
We're
on
gonna
that
have a
one.
fight.
Yeah,
For
absolutely
the
true.
record, I agree
Absolutely
with you.
true.
We're gonna have a fight.
There's some things you can argue with 5e, but that one's absolutely
We're
true.
gonna have a fight.
Then, on the next one, we're going to talk about a very complex thing, which is about spells, which is complex in any of the editions. It's going to be a long discussion of explaining the different things.
How to cast spells.
How to cast spells in
Don't
D&D.
cast fireball.
What the difference
in
is
class.
between how people cast spells, all sorts of different things. The next one, our fifth episode, we're going to talk about loot and magical items, and how you can gauge what to give players that
and
won't screw you over.
Player's favorite item is a bag.
Yeah. Exactly. That we got on our first game.
that we got because you let us.
So...
The next game, we'll talk about NPCs, which are non-player characters that the Dungeon Master creates for people to interact with, and how to create them in the world, and just talk about different NPCs we've created, probably. The next game, we're going to talk about a thing that you wouldn't think is very hard to do in D&D, which is combat, which is pretty hard to do in D&D, at least effectively, so that players stay engaged.
Having a minute of combat would be the same of having a month outside of combat.
Yeah, sometimes that goes that way in D&D.
It really does.
We'll talk about combat. And then we're going to talk about monsters the next week. And probably talk about, what are our favorite monsters and stuff like that. And just cool, basically classic monsters, probably, mostly. Maybe throw in other stuff, but yeah. Then we're going to talk about quest lines for our second to last show of this semester. And how to create quest lines that range from one game to multiple games and stuff like that. And then finally, we're going to talk about group dynamics for our last show of this season. And yeah, that's what we're going to do this season. We weren't prepared for this one today.
I mean, we are.
We are. We had a written plan down.
I think it was
and
pretty
everything.
successful.
Yeah, but we have
As an outside.
13 minutes to spare.
We have.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, I didn't expect to go that quickly.
Yeah, but
I don't know
you
what
want
to
to
do.
know what this means.
We get to
Mr.
talk about.
Daycare kiddo. Story time.
We do get to talk about D&D stories. We talked about this. We talked about this the first day we ever came into here. Is if we ever run out of time before the time goes out, we're gonna talk about just random D&D stories, like how you created and killed Frank, Brandon.
Created and killed Frank.
Wait,
Yeah.
what? Who's Frank?
That's great.
So
in Drew's game, he ran us through. We're in a weird part of the quest line for the campaign, and essentially he came up with this battle. It was very difficult, where we fought a custom-built Hydra. If you guys don't know what a Hydra is, if you remember the Hercules movie from so long ago, the monster that he fights, where you cut off a head, it splits out into more heads every time you cut it off.
it's basically a serpent. It has multiple serpent heads on a lizard body, and when you cut off a head, 2 more grow in its place.
Except the way he made it, they were custom built for each of the characters. So
each head
yeah.
was built to counter the strengths of each of the characters. So like we had one character who specializes in throwing spears, and his particular Hydra, its power was to grab that spear and throw it back with all the power that he had thrown it at it with. No.
So the story of Frank comes to when we had to level up our characters before this game, and me being me as a player, I play an assassin, a gremlin assassin. Think Gizmo from the Gremlins movie. That's essentially me, but like 3 feet tall.
And an assassin.
Not essentially.
And trying to
that
look.
is him.
That is me trying to look very edgy, and act very edgy. Like this. So it's a really fun time. You know, it's a really
from outside. Great look.
it's like a really fun time to play a character, especially when you can do voices like that. But that's essentially so. How Frank came about was I got a new spell which is called Modify Memory, and layman's terms, what Modify Memory does, I concentrate for up to 5 minutes battle time, which means 6 seconds per each round.
Yeah. So every round of combat, everyone gets to do one move action in a regular amount of combat. In ours, we do it a little differently. But everyone gets to use one like action, like attack or cast a spell or whatever.
They get a turn.
Everybody gets a turn for every round. And every round is 6 seconds. Because in combat, if you think about it, a lot of things happen at once. It all goes very quickly. So yeah, every round of combat is 6 seconds, and his thing can last for 10 minutes. So technically, that's 600.
Modifies 5 minutes.
Okay,
up to 5.
300 rounds of combat. We didn't get that far.
I didn't get that far.
We got about 2 rounds.
We got 2 rounds in, and what I essentially asked Drew was, can I use Modify Memory to get the Hydra head to believe we are old friends?
And as you do as a DM, knowing that this is going to be a useless thing to do, you say,
yes.
Technically.
Technically.
Yes.
So I cast the spell, and I tried to do the modification to his memory. I only got 12 seconds in. So all I accomplished, aside from him not attacking me before the actual final fight of the game, which was a success, was that he now believed that his name was Frank.
Yes, and then about 6 seconds into the next combat round with this creature, he immediately killed it.
I immediately killed him and like 4 or 5 other Hydra heads.
You made it believe that you were best buds with it, and its name was Frank, and you had been pals for all your life together, and then you killed it instantly.
We were in battle. A decision had to be made, and I could not believe that I was going to convince the other subsequent Hydra heads that we were friends.
You don't know.
There's no way that was... I do know. There's no way that was going to happen, and the spell takes too long.
Given that you only had one other time you could use that spell, and there were 11 other heads, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it wasn't going to work.
Also, the heads weren't destroying the city or anything.
No.
Yeah.
Well, like a
No,
port.
there's never any sort of stakes in D&D.
It's not,
Bradley, why don't you tell us about your character in our game right now?
Wait, which one?
Yeah, just talk. You know.
You know the one.
Well, I have this guy called Simple Jeff. He's a simple farmer. He likes farming and horses.
Yeah, so your adventure can basically be from any walk of life, of any background. Bradley made the ingenious decision to make a character that is literally just a farmer. I mean, he's technically a druid, so he does have magic powers and stuff, but that's
I talk to the grass
only because it helped him with his farming.
Yeah, but he doesn't like a lot of magic because he calls everything devil magic.
Devil magic?
Devil magic?
Don't you be coming at me with that there devil magic.
He literally has a sword, like a flaming sword.
I don't like that sword.
He would get immunity to
I'm not
fire
attuned to that
if he
sword.
attunes to it.
I'm not attuned to
Doesn't
it.
take it because he's
Nope.
like, that's devil magic.
Devil magic.
Even though he still keeps it,
You still keep
you
it.
still
you
keep
just don't
it, which
use
is
it.
still
That's because
flaming at your
people,
waist.
People kept on yelling at me.
Because he needed something better than throwing sticks at things.
Hey, I had a good... I lost my good sticks.
But, no, one thing great about Bradley as a player is he recognizes that he's a power gamer in some ways.
Yes.
So he makes ridiculous characters to counteract that in
Yeah,
a way.
I make the most ridiculous, flawed people. Like, this simple Jeff character, if you cast, like, any kind of mental ability on him, he will fail, and he will do whatever you want. Every
basically.
time.
Don't get me
You
wrong,
also-
will saves.
He also, Brad's one of my favorite characters of D&D. You constantly roll to make sure you didn't see stuff.
Yes.
Like, you're just proving, like, whenever I say, you see blah, 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 you're like, did I really, though?
See, my other favorite thing about Brad as a player, because I haven't DM'd D&D for a long time, but I've DM'd another tabletop game, which is called Mutants and Masterminds. Essentially D&D superheroes, though. My favorite thing about Brad is that he loves to make either a very broken hero or a very ridiculous hero.
Why not both?
One that comes to mind is Bob. That was the name of his character, and it was an android who was trying to pass as a human and did it poorly. He specifically made sure I knew I do it very poorly.
I am Bob, I am human.
And his costume was, he was in a business
Brad,
suit and wore like a smiley face mask, and it was a
Brad,
paper mask.
It's not funny to me, though, because I have every reason to believe that you really aren't a human in real life. So...
I like math. Don't come at me.
You're a
I'm
madman.
pretty sure he's an android.
You're a madman.
Pretty sure he's an
I mean,
android.
I really much like Detroit Become Human.
I really
God.
much like Detroit Become Human. Is that the English you're going to use
Just
today?
because I like math better than English doesn't mean I'm an android.
It's debatable. Well, do you want to...
Speaking code.
Yeah. Do you want to
Binary.
actually talk about that one story, though? You
one?
mentioned earlier that you
So-
begrudgingly dislike what we have
All right,
now.
so I'm running this game, right, and I'm basing it off of a book because it's a lot easier than making your own adventure. You can buy books, yada yada.
Yeah, there are campaign books you can create
Yeah,
if
so-
you want to do that as a dungeon master.
There's this good one that I'm running, and like they're in some random warehouse. They dealt with some people, and they're just looking around, right? And then so Brandon rolls like some perception check to like find useful
Yeah,
items.
I think I rolled like a 19.
You
and
rolled
I'm
like
the
a
fighter.
19. And like I'm just looking at the sheet of all the things that are in there, and then it's like, oh, if they get a 15, yada yada. There's this secret hatch that can go in this special area, and I'm like, I looked at that previously, and I was like, oh, they're never gonna get it. Well, Brandon's just looking, and it's like,
15? That's easy.
This 15 is easy. I'm surprised
How would we never
that the
get that?
caster...
What?
Well, to be fair, the casters, all three of our casters... By the way, our group's composition is one fighter, which is me, and everybody else chose magic classes.
Well,
It's
two of them are
great.
clerics, though, so we'll
Yeah,
be
two of
fine.
them are clerics, so we'll be fine.
And I'll be a wizard, and then we're gonna have
But
a
to be
sorcerer
fair,
coming.
All the people who cast magic, who should have much better perception than me, all failed this check.
Perception
fighter.
is not something I need.
so this secret hatch basically
Investigation only.
led to a bit of treasure, in which they instantly took the treasure, sold it, and bought a magical item.
Right,
The Bag of Holding.
which we shouldn't have.
The
You
most amazing item in D&D. It is the most common magic item you ever hear about, because it literally makes a pocket dimension that you can
It
put all your
makes it
stuff
so we don't have to deal with stupid numbers of weight,
in. Yeah, carry weight means nothing to us now.
And
which is great.
wouldn't
It's
you think that
amazing.
like 500 gold pieces might just be a good thing to have, maybe, especially if you're new to a city?
No.
Maybe. No? Okay.
We'll win it back.
Okay,
We'll
but
get it back.
Brad, it's a bag of holding. When are we ever gonna have
Where are
the
we
money?
gonna keep
We-
all that money,
But
Brad?
here's the other. Here's the other thing. We asked you specifically, can we buy a bag of holding? You didn't say no. You said we could buy a small bag of holding.
You're in the biggest city of, like, 5th edition.
But you could have
whatever
easily
the place
said
is called.
that we don't have enough money for it.
You easily
You
had
easily
enough money
could
for
have
it. You easily had enough money for it. Don't.
It's fine, Brad.
It's fine. We're not abusing it.
Yeah.
We haven't used it very much aside from holding
You
boatloads
have
of candy.
you have like a lifetime supply of
Brad,
candy in
you
there.
made us not pay for that one thing that you were probably going to have us pay for because we were angry at that dude.
Which dude?
Remember Volo?
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
supposed to pay for the house, but he paid it off for us.
Yeah.
Mostly because I probably scared him.
Yeah.
Because I threatened to cut him
Yeah.
with my swords.
Yeah, he dealt with all of the paperwork and
or the
did
50
it for you
million
guys
other
because
weapons I own.
To be fair, I thought I was thinking that whole time. I think he said that we were getting the money up front, but
he did.
which we did get the money.
He did.
No, literally, the module says that he says that he's going to give you the money.
Yeah,
And then he doesn't have the money, but he has a house instead.
Yeah, the
Oh,
way
okay.
the module works, because it's terrible, and I feel horrible
It's
that I
not
know what the
terrible.
module is.
Only the beginning is terrible.
No, the beginning is terrible. But I actually know this module
That's still
from
good.
a YouTuber who
What season
told
did
me
they do?
about it. They just do the one that they were talking about. It was a brief mention of this with Volo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Anyway, we're
Essentially,
probably getting
yeah.
too far into
Way too far.
stuff.
But his
that
line,
people don't.
honestly,
understand.
this is the line in the book. Yes, I have some problem. I know I said I'd pay you money, but I have a bit of a problem with that. I can give you a house instead.
Basically.
That's
to
how
be
he
fair-
goes. But
in the long run, so much more helpful.
So
the house is so much
much
more
more
helpful. But it gives you perspective where he was going to give you X amount of gold. This house is worth way more than that.
Oh,
Something's
easily,
wrong with it.
Easily. Yeah, I mean, next game.
Next, you know.
Next game.
Yeah, Poltergeist is what's wrong with it, right?
I mean, we're no
You're kind of friends
bundles
with
of
them
sunshine
now.
either. you
All right,
know.
so yeah, we'll probably talk about more D&D stories in the future because what I like about this next semester, Brad, is a lot of these things involve stories that we can talk about, probably.
Oh yeah.
So I'm excited about that,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm excited to see all of you again, you lovely people who are probably not listening.
Somebody.
Somebody?
Anyway.
Anybody? Somebody. Once again, this is WCCX 104.5 FM. There's a Waukesha in there as well.
This has been D&D with BND. Have a good night.